What's up, Rad Pack? Check this out right here. This is we just put Traveler down for a nap, and he is in this new phase of grabbing my throat. I just love him so much. He's like, "Arr." So that's that red mark. If you're listening to this on audio, you have no idea what I'm talking about, but there's the visual for you. So, flashback, February of 2017. Yeah, when we were preparing to do the Window to the Abbey record, my friend and resident guy on keys, better, introduced me to an organization called To Write Love on Her Arms. And I clicked on the link that he sent me, and the vision and the purpose of this organization just immediately resonated with me. I did whatever I could to support them. I bought their T-shirts. I followed them on socials. I retweeted them. I talked about them on streams and at cons whenever I could, just to spread the word. And then one day, Jamie Tworkowski, the founder of TWLOHA, which in this conversation you'll find out is how he prefers to pronounce it, followed me. And over the last several years now, we've DM'd back and forth and whimsically floated ways that we could partner. And the conversation you're going to hear is the first step in that partnership. We decided to lead off with this conversation in light of the news regarding the FCC and them finally granting the newest addition to the three-digit club. So if you're in the States, 988 will be the newest way that you can talk to a counselor 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it made me happy to see our government finally taking steps to recognize suicide as first and foremost a public health issue as well as a mental health issue. Because for too long, we've, as a culture, have disenfranchised those with depression or other mental health issues as just being, quote, sad, or even a far worse moniker, crazy. So we issue a pill or a prayer, and in many cases, we just throw our hands up and hope for the best. What Jamie and his organization demonstrate, and what you will hear about in our talk, is that the path to helping begins with a single conversation. So, let's get into it. Is that you have to own everything that quarantine is for you. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah, totally.
it is just this beautiful swath of everything that we can
Yeah,
do to just get by, and there it is, perfect. It's just it has been the funniest thing I've done. Fortunately, with what I do is people can, like, the second that quarantine started happening I don't know where it happened for you, but we were like Los Angeles. We're early adopters there, dude. And the
yeah.
dogs, absolutely. Mine will go crazy probably here in about an hour. Get it? What's your dog's name?
Gracie. Gracie,
Gracie.
no.
I was never a cat guy. And when I met my wife, I had just lost my dog, and I was like done with pets. I was done with kids, everything. And she had this cat named Grace, and I looked at her, I was like, oh man, no, I could feel it. And she was instantly mine. Her name was Grace. So I love hearing that reprimanding of no,
She's
Grace.
going for it.
Dude, this has been a long time coming, man. One of the cool opportunities that I get in my life, and just kind of as doing what I do, I get the opportunity to have really meaningful, deep conversations with people that I greatly admire. And I've admired you from a distance for a long time. But there's a lot of people, because I came into this um, fairly new. I think I was late to the party because To Write Love on Our Arms started 2007. Is that right?
2006. Super
2006.
close.
Okay. So I came into it much later. I found it through a buddy of mine that I do music with. We were looking
Yeah.
for a charity, and he was like, "This is who she would go with." I was like, "Oh my god, I had no idea that this thing existed." Um, but there's a lot of people that I think that maybe listening to this or watching this that don't know. So if that's not the best way to just kind of tee it up to you, let us know a little bit. We'll find out more about who you are as a person, but just as far as
Yeah.
like what you do and what To Write Love on Our Arms is, I would love for people to really be onboarded.
Sure, sure. I usually try to start at the beginning because we had a really surprising beginning. It wasn't intended back in 2006 to be a charity or a nonprofit or a business or a brand. It started about as small as something could in terms of trying to help one person who very quickly became a friend. She's still my friend today. Her name is Renee Yohe.
Mm.
And when I met her in Central Florida, in Orlando, back in 2006, she was struggling with the issues that we now speak to as an organization. So she was dealing with depression, addiction, self injury. We later learned there had been suicide attempts in her life. And she was denied entry into a local treatment center in Orlando, spent the next 5 days at the house that I was renting a room from. So she spent the next 5 days with my friends and I, and we stayed up late, and for me it was getting to know this new person, and hearing how she got to this place, and all of the hard stuff, and some good stuff as well that made up her life. And I ended up asking her what she thought about the possibility of sharing her story, and ended up writing about that 5 days, and came back to this unusual title. It was a phrase that I wrote in the story, and obviously that was To Write Love on Her Arms. And essentially that story went viral, sort of took on a life of its own. And soon after, I wanted to do more than just tell a story, but tried to raise money to help pay for her treatment, because she was admitted into treatment after the 5 days. And so I had the simple idea to sell t-shirts as a way to raise money to meet that financial need. And really the t-shirts sort of did the same thing as the story. For some people, they encountered the shirts first. For other people, they encountered the story first. This was back 2006 was the moment of MySpace, and so it was kind of the beginning of the world that we live in now, where social media is just part of everyday life. And so MySpace became a home for the story, and then the shirts, and we just watched it spread very quickly, and started to hear from people at first in other states and then other countries. And it was just people who could relate to what Renee had been through and what Renee was going through. It was people reaching out on behalf of someone they cared about, someone they wanted to help, people asking for advice, people admitting they had a lot to
Mm.
learn, other people simply asking how they could get involved, how they could help in some way. And so really the nonprofit was born out of the response to that story, and also out of realizing, wow, we're selling a bunch of t-shirts, we can do more than help one person. And then you fast forward to today, and there's a whole team of people. The organization's based in Central Florida, in Melbourne, Florida, and I think we're right around 20 on staff. And then it's an unusual moment with the pandemic, but we typically have 5 or 6 interns who come and live together and work alongside our team for a semester at a time. And social media remains home base. We love that over the years we've also been able to hit the road and be a part of music festivals, do things on college campuses, high schools, conferences. Obviously, all of that is on hold right now. But we get to meet people where they are and invite people into this mental health conversation. We get to connect people to resources, connect people to professional help. At times, we get to help pay for that professional help. So we get to finance counseling and treatment. And yeah, the whole thing has been this incredible surprise. We've heard from people in over 100 countries. We've been able to give more than $2.5 million to treatment and counseling. So yeah, my life definitely changed as a result of meeting Renee and writing that story back in '06.
I want to know. I'm fascinated by people's stories, and people that know me, and people that have been kind of tracking along with what this is. It feels like one big conversation that just kind of perpetuates and grows and evolves as more people become a part of it. But I'm of the notion and the belief and the philosophy that we are all genetically, we're storytellers. Like that is why, and I use this joke a lot, and people are probably starting to roll their eyes whenever they hear me say it, but it's the reason why we created language, was because we are trying to tell our stories. I know that notion of telling your story and your life being a story is just as endemic as it could be to the organization and what you are. I feel like the guy wearing the concert, the band shirt to the concert, but
No,
like this is,
I got one on
yeah,
too.
dude. I came to the story first and then found it's very hard for me to find T-shirts that I'm like, I love supporting things, especially when it has merchandise. But this was like, oh no, this people who when I first did my album, we live streamed the entire process of it, and literally it was just like every day was like, this is my wardrobe. This is all I'm
Yeah,
wearing
yeah.
is the True I Love It Arms entire like summer line. But
Amazing.
the notion that we are storytellers, and that this from the very beginning of time, when we first drew on cave walls, or we first walked out of that cave and went back in to tell the others what it is that we saw, this is us trying to communicate. And I feel even now that's the biggest obstacle, is for us to find the lexicon and the vernacular to be able to communicate with each other and say, I'm just trying to tell you my story.
Mm,
But the first question that I have is, you have this incredible encounter with Renee, and it starts on just one night that became a conversation that would grow into this. And I loved you started reading off. But Tom, our producer, is so great, and he's like, "Dude, you need to know all these facts." I was like, "I know a lot about Jamie, but I want to know kind of the bullet point facts." And I'm looking here at my notes, and I'm watching you just kind of like hit all of these bullet points that he's done, and it's fascinating to hear you see, and it's fascinating to read the accomplishments and the bullet points that are in front of me of what a singular conversation began. But why you? Why is it that Renee reached out, opened up, and shared you? What do you think it was about you that
yeah.
there's a lot of people that I've encountered, or maybe even you've encountered in your life, that have been like, I'm kind of having a hard day, or I'm struggling with this, or have said nothing at all? What do you think it was about you that gave her the freedom and the safety to share so much about herself that was so deep? Was it the time? Was it you? What was it?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. And I've been asked a lot of questions, and obviously a lot of the same questions over the years. And I don't know that I've exactly gotten that one,
Cool.
which is surprising because that is that question makes so much sense. I don't know exactly. I think one thing I try to point out is a lot of people like the idea of sort of making me the hero in the story, especially even in those early days, like in the 5 days after she was denied entry into treatment. And I try to point out that she actually reached out to my friend David, who was in recovery
Hmm.
and was sort of really became like a big brother to her. And David invited me to meet Renee. And then, I don't know. I think it's hard to, hopefully, this isn't like a woo woo answer, but I think it can be hard to explain or articulate how and why we connect with someone,
Hmm.
like where it's just like, oh my gosh, you're my friend. Like we're meant to know each other, and we just kind of click. And I think I asked a lot of questions. I guess I feel like she felt safe enough to share. I think it was obviously a really unique situation to meet in, and so we had these really deep, long conversations. And I tell people that I don't think at that point I had experienced conversation, or I don't think I had met someone in that exact place. And so for me, this was all very new.
Hmm.
Um, but I think she must have felt safe. And then it was also, it wasn't like she said, "Hey, you should write my story." I mean, I was the one that asked her that weird question, and I tell people all the time I would have understood if she said no way or get lost. But I was moved by getting to know her and by learning some of her story, and I've just believed that other people could be as well. And so I, asked that vulnerable question of would you be open to me sharing part of your story? And I didn't know where that would go or what it would lead to. And I would have understood if she said no or no way. And obviously I was surprised and pleasantly surprised when she not only was open to the idea, but really seemed to like the idea. And I remember she talked about if one person, if one family could benefit, if someone could be encouraged, if someone could end up getting help as a result of you writing this story, then that would be great. That would be worth it. And obviously, it's amazing to think about everything that's happened since then.
And I'm sure that from that point to this, which now it's been 14 years, which is
Yeah.
crazy to think. Rest in peace, MySpace.
Mhm.
You had no idea that you were going to be the harbinger of literally what our society has become. Like you said, it's become so just entangled within our society. But I'll get to that a little bit because I love what you've been able to do, and we can discuss the whole notion of social media in a second. But you've in those 14 years. And all of again the accomplishments and the accolades that you've been able to accomplish, and the things you've been able to do, and the things you've seen, and I'm sure the wisdom that you've learned. Um, do you feel that in that moment, going back to those initial conversations, do you feel like it was you met her on you approached it from a place of was it academic, and you understood this cognitively because of things that you had experiences that you had, or wisdom you had gained, or was it more experiential? You're like, I can relate to you because, and maybe I can help you articulate the way that you feel because I felt that exact way. Was it more of a cognitive thing, or was it more of an
Mm.
experiential?
I think it's funny, as you were talking, my gut was to say, I don't think I've ever approached anything academically.
Yeah, me too.
So I think I think it would be more on a heart level.
Mm,
And I don't think it was like, hey, let me help you tell your story. I think I was moved by the experience. And it's also funny because it's obviously a bit foggy. And a friend of mine shared something great where it's weird when you live an experience one time and then you talk about it for 14 years because it almost becomes a script, and you're more sure about the script
then
that
you
you've
more of the
written
actual
than the
experience. Yeah, I don't understand that
and
for sure.
yeah. And then also like a movie was made about it, so that's another funny layer of, so it's almost like, wait, what actually happened?
Well, movies
But I
are
think
always one to one the actual story, right? I mean, there's never any license given.
I think the I think I was moved, and there was a part of me, I think I wanted to honor her. I I wanted to capture. Oh, hang on, sorry.
Cool.
No, my phone was ringing. I wanted to capture what was moving around in me, and I didn't want to forget. I didn't want to just go back to normal.
Mm.
Um, and and then I guess somewhere in there was wondering if I'm moved, maybe someone else could be moved by this experience being shared. And I don't really know at what point. It's hard to say if right away or it was a few days later that it was also the idea of, hey, we can do this to help you. Like we can do this to meet the basic needs. We can do this. I think it was a short while later where it was the idea of selling T-shirts and wanting to meet a practical need. So not just communicating and not just encouraging or inspiring people, but hey, how can we harness? How can we create sort of an action step in this moment?
Yeah, it became more of an equipping, right? Because there's one thing I feel if I like, hey, I'm having a hard day. It's like, hey, I'm going to be there for you, and I'm gonna give you some words, or I'm gonna give you a book, or I'm gonna give you some kind of. There's a lot of purveyors and people that dole out cookie cutter fortune cookie wisdom that are great for your Instagram story, but really don't penetrate to where I could be like I I understand that, again, academically, I understand that cognitively, that I'm supposed to be present and that this too shall pass, and everything else that's written in a really pretty font that someone was able to put down. But I need more than what's on the t-shirt. What I need is for somebody to give me the tools and be able to say, like you said for Renee, it's like, we need to be able to pay for this treatment. And that kind of moves into this next part. I I had a hard time, for me, and I know that, I've listened to a lot of your talks, and what I love is that as I was first introduced to the organization, and then I've delved into it more of a personal level. So there's some things that you talked about, like your TEDx talk is great. It's very, very brief, and it's such a snapshot. But I learned so much about you and about, even the subject matter you're talking about. Um, but something that resonated with me is that there's this. I walk around, often with this. Even though I try to be as authentic as I can, there's still, I feel like there's a mask and there's a pretense because of what people assume about me. I'm a very effusive, very optimistic person. And so, therefore, if anybody, even just the other day, I kind of had a moment where I was like, man, I'm kind of getting my ass kicked here a little bit. And people were like, dude, are you okay? So if
Yeah.
someone who has a constant smile on their face ever shows the crack in the veneer, it for some reason is far more dramatic. And I'm like, oh man, have I not done a good enough job of letting you people know that I go through this as well, and that I have these swells and these peaks and valleys too? And I struggled 4 years ago, with it. I th- I had equated and conflated depression and sadness. And I feel that there's a danger in that because often those two are not synonymous. It's not that they're mutually exclusive, but there's not this just, oh, if you're sad, you're depressed, or if you're depressed, you're sad. Um, and what I was finding was that I was trying to, I felt like a prisoner trying to escape a tunnel with a blunt spoon. I was like, this is never going to get me out of here. And unless you're Andy Dufresne and you spend 14 years,
Yeah.
behind a poster. And even then, you still have to emerge through a tunnel of shit to get to where you need to be. But I was finding, I was like, man, I am just not. I'm climbing out of this thing and I'm just sliding down and I'm not gaining any ground. And I realized that I was like, oh, this is what depression is, which is an inability to handle and grapple with. I don't have the tools.
Mm.
And so that's when I had to reach out and go, I really need to talk to somebody. And the people that were the closest around me were flabbergasted. Like, what do you mean? Because here's the person that is constantly quoting the same things that you see on the t-shirts or whatever. And they're like, I thought you had such a good handle on it. And I had
Mm.
to get past that ego of going, oh, you guys need to understand that I hurt too. And the freedom that I found once I did that. Um, but I wanted to see if you could speak to that a little bit because I think there is this perception of what depression is, um, even to the point of a friend of mine. Uh, we had talked about some of the issues that they had, and the things that they were struggling with that would fall into a classic mental health kind of category. And they kind of shrugged it off as old school, like, I'm fine. Just kind of, I need to toughen up. I need to, I just smile and get through it and be happy. And they had a cough, and he goes, I got to go to the doctor, man. I've had this cough for 3 days. I went, you're going to a doctor? He's like, yeah, hopefully he can give me a Z-Pack or whatever and get rid of this cough. I was like, how long have you been feeling this anxiety? He's like, I mean, my whole life. I was like, and you've
Yeah.
never gone to a doctor about that? You have a cough, a tickle in your throat for 3 days, and you will put whatever pill they prescribe to you in your body, irregardless of consequence. Irregardless is not a word, but regardless of consequence. But when it comes to your heart, your head, your soul, there's this boundary.
Mm.
Did you encounter that? Did you, how have you wrestled with that? And how have you seen that manifest in all the people that you've helped all around the world? Is that a commonality that you've seen? And how do you help people recognize the fact that mental health is just health?
Yeah, I think especially in the last couple of years, I've really latched on to that language, that idea that I think I've even been sharing it just in a way where like we're dreaming about a world and working toward a world where it's exactly what you said, where in the same way we don't think twice about going to the doctor for a cold or for a sprained ankle, that we would approach mental health that way. And not only even as it relates to reaching out for professional help, but even short of that, just talking openly and honestly. So I think we've certainly seen that, but I think we're also in an interesting spot where we're constantly communicating. We're constantly sending words out into the world. You know, Twitter, our blog, website, newsletter, public speaking. And so what we get back the most is people who are kind of taking that step forward in response. Um, People who want to have the conversation, whether that's the first time in a while, the first time in their life. So I try to be mindful of that, that we don't, like, obviously that stuff's going to stand. We don't get a lot of people that choose to respond to sort of debate or disagree, if that
Mm,
makes sense.
sure.
But I think I can step back and see culturally that, you know, certainly a stigma has existed for, you know, as long as we've done this work. I do think things have gotten better. I think that we see more and more, not only people talking about it, but with that we see it showing up in Hollywood and sports and just all sorts of settings, right? Like all the different circles that people run in, because these are simply issues that affect people. So I think there's a lot of good and a lot of positive change in terms of people being more open and being more aware. But I think certainly there's still a lot of work to do, and certainly the example you brought up is still reality for so many people. That so many people, maybe even the average person, is still more comfortable going to the doctor for a cold than saying, "Hey, I think I might be dealing with depression or anxiety, and I think I would like to get some help for it." So I think we're really thankful for the exchanges and the moments when people do step forward, or the equivalent of that, when someone does say, "Hey, I think this applies to me. I need some help. I need to talk to someone." But we know that there's a lot of work to be done.
Have you seen that conversation shift since quarantine? Have you seen people? I feel, and maybe this is the algorithm working for what I put out there. But do you feel that there's been more openness since people have been in isolation for these last 2 months, or have you seen the conversation move away from it?
No, I agree with the first part. I've seen a couple people joke. I don't even know if they were memes or not, but I guess they were memes. Kind of the idea that, oh wow, suddenly the whole world's anxiety caught up to mine.
Right?
You
Yeah.
know,
It's like,
so I
oh,
think,
welcome. We got jackets, baby.
yeah, and I saw an article a couple days ago about, this was only talking about Japan, but I believe it said for the month of April that suicide rates were down,
Down.
or the suicide rate was down 20%, which is counterintuitive because a lot of people are assuming the opposite would
Right.
be the case. And I think oftentimes when we're struggling, we believe this lie that I'm the only one who's struggling.
Mm,
And suddenly this feels more like a moment when we're aware that essentially the whole world is struggling. Obviously, our struggles look different. Some people are out of work, some people are grieving, some people are sick. We know circumstances are different, but all of the sudden there's this feeling, no matter where you live, that life is hard.
right.
And certainly it's harder than it was. And with that, I think at first we saw such a focus obviously on physical health and the pandemic, but I think soon after you see so many articles and people talking about the mental health aspect of this, and people just admitting, "Hey, I'm lonely. Hey, I'm scared. um, I miss I miss having coffee with a friend. I miss physical touch." So I think that's been a really positive thing. And even looking at that article I stumbled upon, to me, that was amazing. They even talked about how some people are less stressed out because they're not commuting to work and working 60 hours a week. And all of a sudden, people are, maybe they're physically more connected to their family, or they're simply communicating more with loved ones. So I think it's not at all a commentary on, oh, let's just stay this way forever, because
Sure.
we can't do that. But I think there's a lot of good that we can mine from this time.
What have you found to be universally true, if there is such a thing? Maybe there's not. Between people who, because different people suffer, I use the word suffer for convenience. Experience is more the thing, because I hate to
Sure.
automatically categorize it as you're suffering, therefore it's a sickness, as opposed to there's pain that we're just simply identifying and learning the language of how to identify that. And I get this a lot where people say, I'm really going through something
Mm.
right now. And I'm like, that's awesome. That implies that you have at least the understanding of the framework that you're starting from one place and you're going to eventually get to another place. You're going through it. Yeah, at least you're not stagnant and
Yeah.
sitting there. You're going through it. Um, and understanding that there is a natural flow to things. And the fear that I always had was that I won't come back up, that this is where I'm always I remember that old YouTube video, the kid who gets out of the dentist is like, is this gonna be forever? You
Yeah, yeah,
know?
yeah.
And I think that's always the fear. And I talked to a dear friend of mine, Jennifer Hale. We were backstage at a convention. She's an amazing actress. She was in Mass Effect. She played FemShep, as everyone knows if you played Mass Effect. In addition to just a litany of other roles. But we were sitting backstage, and some of these conversations that we'll have at these conventions, um, because and I genuinely miss them right now, because they were just such a great, that they're a petri dish of germs. So I understand why they're not having them. But there was also this really cool time where people that even though I work with these people, these are colleagues or friends, I don't really get a chance to see them much because we're working and we have families and we're doing life.
Sure.
But these little moments when we're like, we're gonna be in Seattle for the next 4 days, and it's kind of like camp, and we just get to kind of hang out and dive into each other. She said she was talking about she had a broken foot, and my wife went through 40 hours of labor, and I learned of back labor at home, no drugs. And
Whoa.
I learned that I was like, here is proof positive that men are by far the weaker species, because we would have like, if we had to give birth through what the equipment that we were given, was like, that's it, guys. Like you're the last person that's ever going to be on this planet, because we're just not doing it anymore.
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
rather the species die off than go through that. And we had this amazing birth. Our son is incredible, and now it's like, yeah, I think she's like, I could do that again. I'm like, wow, I remember what you went through. It's amazing to me that these are just nuclear powerhouses of energy and life. Um, but I was asking Jennifer Hale, because she has a wonderful son, as well as like, how is pain different for you now that you've given birth? And she said what it taught me was that experiencing pain absent of fear is really, that's the juice. And once you
Mm.
can say that this isn't going to be forever, then I can actually experience pain, and it's not as bad. It's like, yeah, I feel that it's pressure, but I understand what's happening to my body. Or if we can apply this, what it taught me was that, okay, I understand that I'm here now, but I also understand that I was here.
Mm.
And this isn't going to be forever. So eventually, this is going to right myself. And what I need to do is find the path of how to get here. But different people experience, that was a big divergence for me to get back to this question, but different people experience whatever aspect of mental health challenges obstacles that they have. But have you found there to be a commonality between all those people, and go, at the root of it is this? Um, is that true? Is that or is it just, it's such a cornucopia that it's impossible to go, I don't know, man, you just feel this way. What have you found?
Yeah. No, I think, I mean, I do think that a lot of times I zoom all the way out to kind of the human condition,
Mm.
where it's like in any audience, not everyone is depressed. Not everyone needs to make a counseling appointment. Some people probably do, and that's okay. But everyone in the room can relate to pain, can relate to grief, sadness, at least moments of anxiety. It doesn't necessarily mean they, struggle with anxiety. So I love to kind of start there, that we can all relate to loss. We can all relate to sadness. And I think you touched on it earlier, where it's like when it becomes something that we can't seem to shake and we can't seem to figure out on our own, that's when it is the right time to reach out to other people and even reach out to professional help. And I think a lot of times it's circumstantial, or the circumstance for me as someone who struggles with depression, the hardest times have always been tied to the circumstance of breakups or a
Mm.
long season after a breakup, and the inability to let go, the inability to believe I could be happy again or find love again. But then I also think I've struggled with depression when there's not exactly a reason circumstantially. Um, and I think some people can say, hey, I had a terrible relationship with my parents growing up. Like, I think some people can put a finger on what hurts, but I think other people, uh, they, on paper, it looks like life has been pretty good and they've had it even sort of easy. But I think we've learned that no one is immune to struggle. And certainly, I mean, it's almost cliche, but we know it's true. It's like, how many even celebrities or incredibly successful people look like they have everything you could wish for, money, accomplishments, attention, success, and they're totally unhappy, and that's been true since before you and I were born, and it's still true today. So I don't know if there's an answer in there. I guess it can be both. And I think because I think in a way I maybe don't spend as much time looking at the origin. I think that's important when it comes to, I think that's something you address in counseling or with a professional. But I think we're in more of that spot of trying to encourage people to take the necessary steps to get whatever help they need. And for some people it might be 2 or 3 months of counseling, and for other people it's something way more intense than that.
Sure.
It's weeks or months of treatment. So I think we love to encourage people that there's no shame, whatever that recovery and help and healing has to look like. There's no shame in that.
You mentioned like the starting off like 2006. That's where like I remember watching. I don't know if you watched BoJack Horseman or not, but they did an episode where they went back to 2006. I was like, that doesn't seem like
No
that
way.
long ago, right? It doesn't seem long ago.
Yeah.
And then they start kind of like it felt like this backwards in time warped. I was like, wow, we were listening to that, and boy, that had
Yeah.
just started. So you say 2006 in MySpace. I was like, that feels like forever ago. But MySpace had no idea. And that really wasn't even, it was Friendster, right? Before that was kind of the
Yeah.
first social media platform. So you have MySpace that comes
Was
on.
it? And Zenga? Somebody was talking about Zenga the other day. I didn't have a Friendster or a
I
Zenga.
didn't
I guess
either.
LiveJournal was in there
Live
somewhere.
Journal. Holy crap,
But
dude.
so MySpace was my entry point, and
Mine too.
everything before that is foreign to me.
Yeah, I will readily admit that I was a late adopter to all the cool things that the kids were doing. I remember the first time I was like, fine, I'll go on MySpace. And then it was like, the thing about MySpace for me was like, it's the same reason. I don't know if you're a gamer or not, but the reason why a lot of times I won't crack open an RPG is because I know myself well enough that I know that I will devote 2 days just to designing my character. When GTA 5, I was like, this is gonna be fine. This will be safe. And then it was like, oh, multiplayer, you can actually design your character. I was like, man, I'm no one's gonna see me for the next 3 days because I've got to get it just exact. So MySpace for me was like, well, now there's backgrounds, and now I can actually
Yeah,
put
yeah, yeah.
a song up there. It's like, well, I don't
And
know
like
what song like
there's
actually defines
yeah.
me.
And then you could add banners and photos.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
So that's where it started, right? Now, as you said when we first started, like this thing has become such a entwined critical part of our culture, of who we are. It's no longer just this thing that I do. It literally is the hub by which we communicate, we receive information, we give information, we experience life, we see things, we consume media. It is by and large, it has become kind of the, like, not even Orwell could have envisioned what this thing will be.
Mm.
How have you seen that component change the conversation? Or you talked about how circumstantially a lot of times is the way that you would start to your depression would kind of move in those ebbs and flows circumstantially. How have you seen social media, because it's so pervasive in our society, in our community, how have you seen that influence the conversation and specifically people's mental health?
Yeah, I think I think the first thing that comes to mind is you see more good and more bad.
Mm,
And certainly with that, I mean it's true of so many aspects of life, but certainly the internet and even in this moment, social media specifically, but it's like, and even looking at the To Write Love on Arm story, we've been able to use social media to reach people in places we've never been, to reach people in countries where they don't even primarily speak English. We've seen the best of the internet. I try to point that out to people that, literally the organization got started and gets to exist today really because of the internet. Um, and then not only that, but we can connect people to resources. Someone can through social media end up on our website and end up on the website of a local counseling office or a treatment center. They can become aware of crisis text line or another suicide hotline. So I think we try to acknowledge all the good, and then not only that, but we can connect. Like we can be inspired, we can be moved, we can you kind of started off by talking about stories in different forms. We can experience and be moved by stories. And then there's sort of the other side of it all, of feeling jealous, feeling not good enough, feeling
mhm.
competitive, looking at these highlight reels of our friends or celebrities all day, every day. Uh, and I think the negativity that can come with that. And then not to mention just, it makes sense that people would feel anxious if we're taking in really hard news all day, every day right now. I mean, even looking at like the last 6 months or a year, it's like, hey, is the planet going to overheat? Are we going to go to war? Oh, wow. Coronavirus. Is it what's actually true? You know what I
Right.
mean? So it's like, I think whether you're looking at things as small as, you're a high school student looking at your classmates, or you're an individual trying to make sense of the whole world, um, we take in so much that can make us anxious, can make us afraid, can make us question if we're good enough. Am I pretty enough? Am I interesting enough? Am
Hmm.
I successful? So I think it feels good to acknowledge both. And then I'll close it with this. I think, especially early on, some people wondered if we were trying to create almost an online utopia where it's like, hey, all the sad people are going to find each other and we're going to encourage each other and everyone's going to be okay. And it's all going to happen, back then on MySpace and then Facebook and, on all these different platforms now. And I think there's an irony that we love social media. I say we as an organization, we love the internet, we love social media, but there's an irony where we're also saying you have to, at some point, close those things out and have relationships, really be known. And typically outside of a pandemic, I would say, man, close your laptop, put your phone down, get coffee, get a meal with someone you love, have honest conversations. And in this moment, that it probably is going to require a smartphone or a laptop, right? Even what we're doing right now. Um, so I think to me, it just feels healthy and reasonable to point out both ends of the spectrum. And obviously, there's a lot in between. So I think we're really grateful for the good, but we want to acknowledge the darker stuff. And then I think ultimately just say, how do we find a balance? I think that's one thing I've thought about in this pandemic moment is even when it feels like so many things are canceled and limited,
Hmm.
I've just tried to encourage people like, man, what does it look like to whatever extent you can to mix up your day? So it's like, it's not all Netflix, it's not all exercise. It's like it's conversations, it's taking my dog for a walk, it's hey, it is okay to watch a movie, it's getting some work done. It's like just I think as much as that relates to the moment we're in, I think it applies to social media. And maybe you touched on gaming. It's like we probably can't do any one thing all of the time,
Right.
or it's not going to be super healthy. So I think a lot of us are trying to figure out what is a healthy amount of hours to look at my phone each day or to spend on social media. And you could apply that to work, you could apply that to hobbies, you could apply that to almost anything.
What is
Sorry, that was a really long answer.
No, dude, trust me. People, they understand me. I give long, lengthy answers to the shortest and smallest of questions. So you and I, we're having the same kind of same kind of conversation. The I wanted to something you just said pinged. What is that? Do you think for people right now? Like, what if you could? So many people right now are just kind of screaming out into the void of social media. Um, because it is so hard. I feel to feel like we have a voice, and here is this device that we are given that is supposed to tell us that we have a voice, but then it just gets lost above the din. And I'll never forget uh, Richard Dreyfuss in all the amazing movies that he's been in, all the incredible lines of dialogue he's been given to say. The thing that I will never forget and hold in highest regard that he said was a conversation that we were having in I think it was Perth, Australia, actually. Again at a convention, and we were
Yeah.
talking about. It felt like a fever dream, man. I was backstage with Richard Dreyfuss. Kathleen Turner was telling me where I should buy hats in London. And somebody was singing Journey off in the side, and then Richard Dreyfuss was wearing a pin that said I love Richard Dreyfuss. I was like, if somebody looked at me right now and was like, you're in a coma, I'd be like, oh, that's what this is. Got it. Jeez. But Richard Dreyfuss looked at me, he goes, you can't scream reason. And that's why crazy always wins. And I went, dude, you're absolutely right. And the whole point of it wins that argument, because you will never be able to, second that you have to match the tone of someone who's
Mm,
crazy, then all of a sudden you've lost. And to the point of it to me is, if you want to try to fight with someone on the internet because you feel that their perspective is so different than yours that it's wrong,
mm.
the best thing to do is, I have found, is just to walk away, and that's when reason actually wins. But so many people I hear say, "Oh, I hate social media. I hate social media," and what I've found to be universally true is that it is an algorithm. There was a
Yeah.
great conversation with the guy who created Twitter, Jack, whatever his name is,
Yeah.
uh,
Dorsey.
Jack Dorsey. Um, and they said, "Don't you think that Twitter has some responsibility in what's happening?" He was like, "We're an algorithm, man. We're a platform." Ari Shafir, the comedian, did a social media experiment, where all he did for like, I think it was like 30 days. It wasn't long. It was like 30 to 60 days. All he did was Googled puppies. And all of a sudden, that algorithm on Twitter and social media
Oh,
just
yeah,
started
yeah.
tracking with him. Is like, this is what you care about. So to
Yeah.
me, that was very revelatory of whenever I see something pop up and I'm like, oh, this stupid, I can't believe. I'm like, yo, I'm literally putting that out there that's what I want. And I started looking up, uh, you always hear about dopamine, dopamine, dopamine,
Mm,
dopamine, and how social media is like a dopamine hit. I was like, what does that mean? I understand that buzzword. I understand what dopamine is, but I want to know really, what is that thing? And so I looked it up. I don't know if you've done this or not, but I looked it up, and it said what dopamine does is the way that it interacts with our neural transmitters in our brain, and that chemical that's secreted in that part of our brain that goes boom. What it actually does is it fights off motivational salience, which means people think that dopamine makes you feel good. And that's not true, because there's a lot of people that don't feel good when they do whatever gives them that dopamine hit, including going through social media. What it makes us feel like is that we actually accomplished something, that we moved
Mm.
from point A to point B. And I brought up the other day, I smoked for 20 years. And I said that feeling you get when before you've even finished this cigarette, you already want another one.
Mm.
That is what we're constantly chasing. Heroin addicts call it chasing the dragon. It's like, I'll never be able to get what I'm actually looking for. And so we need more and more of that dopamine to make us
Yeah.
feel like we accomplished something. But you said that you have seen the best of the internet and you've also seen the worst. And what I love that you said is that you also don't want to negate or deny that there is the negative out there. And I think that there's some people out there that's just like, it's sunshine and rainbows and everything is fine. No, don't look over here. Look over here. We're having fun. As opposed to someone, yeah, but the second that this show ends, this game is over, this podcast is done, there's still things that are stacked outside my door that are very real and very scary. How do you feel like if you could, I go back to you're screaming into the void, if you could grab the internet, grab people by their hearts and go, if I could tell you one thing, what would that thing be?
Yeah. I think I might cheat and make it like a
Go.
two-parter.
Love
But
it.
I think I think we're made to be known, and I think we're made for real relationships. And so to me, no amount of scrolling and wandering, I feel like it's a bit of a side note, but I feel like a lot of people are thinking and talking about that, the difference between sort of going on for a purpose, like if we jump on Instagram versus just wandering for minutes that turn into hours. But I think just believing that nothing beats having real friends, nothing beats being close to family. Nothing beats, no amount of followers will take the place of having a few friends that really know you.
Hmm.
And again, they're not mutually exclusive, but I think I just encourage people to really lean, especially as it relates to mental health and the hard parts of life. Like we need people that support us. We need people that want to know us. We need people that we don't have to perform for. And we need people that are going to walk with us through the hard stuff. And then at the same time, we need to be that character for X amount of people as well. And then I think the additional part is just really wanting people to believe that if you struggle or you're hurting, you're grieving, that it's totally okay to ask for help. You brought up your buddy's example. That is what we want, and I think you want that too. That idea that being depressed or being anxious or even dealing with addiction or thoughts of suicide shouldn't be any different than have the way we approach a cough or a flu or something as awful as cancer or a broken bone. So I think it's that combination of relationships and professional help would just be like my hope for the world.
That's an amazing thing to intonate and encourage. And I've seen this be, like I said, this is a conversation that started with one person and now it's grown to, I'm sure at this point, probably countless, because you can catalog some of the things because of the data that you get, but then there's also far reaching conversations that you will never know the impact that this
Sure.
thing has had. Um, just as much as you didn't know that I was a fan until I had to reach out, or I got the chance to
Yeah,
reach out
yeah.
to you, and the people that I've talked to about this as well. Where I also want to be someone who is able to facilitate that and point people to that. If people are at the point where they're ready to join in that conversation, please, what have you got coming up this year? How can people connect with this organization? How would you encourage people to get to join in this conversation with you?
Yeah. Here's a retroactive answer that's ultimately unhelpful. But on Saturday, a couple days ago,
Yeah,
I don't know when this will come out, but
sure.
as we're talking a couple days ago, uh, we had our 8th annual Run For It
5K.
5K.
Yeah.
And we have a physical gathering, a traditional 5K in Florida. And then a virtual aspect where people can run or walk or participate wherever they are. So obviously we didn't have the physical gathering. We wondered if we'd have to cancel it altogether. It ended up becoming the biggest 5K we've ever done. So over the weekend, we had right around 4,000 people
Incredible.
participate. So it was all 50 states, I think 17 countries. We raised, I haven't seen the latest number, but I know it was around $95,000. So it was just really cool where we wondered, man, can this happen at all? Do we need to cancel? And it ended up being awesome. So that's been the focus for really the last 4 or 5 weeks, just leading up to this weekend. And obviously all of our events are on hold, kind of like
the rest of the world. Sure.
Yeah. So that means, typically we'd have a busy summer of music festivals, and I'd be looking forward to some college speaking events, whether it was May or in the fall. So all of that's on hold. We've been showing up for a while. We were doing 2 a week. We're doing 1 a week right now, but just going live on Instagram like so many people are. And we've just been trying to use these sessions to have conversations similar to this one, where we just talk about what does self-care look like in this season? What does prioritizing mental health look like? So trying to have conversations with friends of the organization and just sort of ask what does being healthy look like right now? And I think with that, encouraging people to be honest, so it can also be what's really hard right now. So not just like, hey, what are your keys to life?
Sure.
But how, just what sucks about this. But anyway, to kind of get specific to your question, we'd invite people to our website. There's a bunch of different ways for people to get involved. I joke it can be as small as ordering a t-shirt and as big as joining our team in Florida, and a whole bunch of ways in between. We created a landing page. We call it Fear Won't Win, that we've created for this season that we find ourselves in. And it's everything from blog posts that we've kind of curated and picked out, podcast episodes, coloring book pages people can download and print out. So just trying to give people tools and resources to make good use of this time. And so we would invite people to our website. It's the acronym, it's TWLOHA.com. They can find us on social media. We're at TWLOHA in all of those places. And yeah, we love moments like this where it's just the chance to introduce people to our story and just to invite people to learn more and to get involved if they choose to.
In addition to finally being able to sit down and talk to you and meeting Gracie.
She was good for a while.
Oh, she was great. I love that I now have the canonized way of how to properly say the abbreviated form of To Write Love on Our Arms, TWLOHA. I've never wanted, I've always just been able to just, look, man, for brevity's sake, I'm just going to say the name, or TWHLA, but I've never wanted to TWLOHA, because I always thought that I
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry about my dog.
Oh.
You know what's funny is I'm not precious about it, and I think people get really insecure, like especially if they're talking to me, like they don't want to say it wrong. Gracie. You know what I mean? But I have really dear friends that will screw up the word, like they'll say the words wrong. Or they'll a lot of people say TWLOHA, which is, when I look at it, it's not accurate. So we just say TWLOHA because that's, if you look at it, it's kind of like, it's like aloha, but there's a TW at the beginning. But again, we don't beat people up over it.
Man, it sounds to me like that is exactly what this organization has always strived to be, embodied in just that one thing. It's that you began something, and the people that you meet and the people that you engage with this conversation with end up taking it, and even if it's different, they allow it to grow and allow it to change. And the fact that you support that. So
yeah, I like that.
Man, I can't thank you enough for finally taking the time. I've been such a great, like I said, a great admirer of you and the work that this organization has done. And I'm really grateful for you taking the time and allowing us to get into it.
Likewise, man. No, I'm excited to learn more about you. I really have enjoyed the conversation and totally appreciate your support. So it's a two-way street.